sort of not so long ago, passed away recently. And in respect of the contribution he made, and I think a minute silence will be appropriate. So I hope you will all join me, and I'm going to stand for this for a minute silence in memory of Peter Isherwood. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know anybody wishes to have anything about Peter Isherwood before any member wishes to speak on memory. I know this is a funeral on Tuesday the 26th, I believe, which I hope to attend myself. Yes, Councillor Mulliner.
If it's on the topic of Councillor Isherwood, I would just like to say how long he served, how assiduously he took his planning duties. He chaired the planning committee at Haslemere Town Council, as well as the Southern Area Committee here. And he achieved that rare balance between being able to operate in both spheres while making it very clear to those on the Town Council that he could quite easily take a different view at the Borough Council, because of course he would then have access to more information through the officer's report. And I think one of his achievements was to actually help to educate his fellow town councillors on this subtle but important distinction. And quite apart from his abilities as a councillor, he was a very, very pleasant man and will be greatly missed.
Thank you much. Does any other councillor wish to speak on? No? Okay. Right. The agenda. Apologies for absence and substitutes. Kimberley, we were largely to apologies tonight.
Yes, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Sally Dixon, Councillor Dan Hunt, Councillor Simon Deere, Councillor Jackie Keane, Councillor Roger Blishin and Councillor George Hess. We have Councillor Stephen Mulliner, Councillor Peter Nicholson and Councillor Jerry Hyman here substituting.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman, could I correct that?
Yes, sure.
I'm disappointed it hasn't been communicated. I'm now actually a replacement for Councillor Isherwood, and that's been confirmed with Democratic Services.
Thank you, Councillor Mulliner. That hasn't been passed on to me.
Thank you very much. That'll be corrected, and you can be sure. Right. Okay. Next item is the minutes of the last meeting. Have everybody read that it's been held on the 23rd and 30th of March and published on the council website? Everybody agreed that the correct records of those meetings? Agreed. Thank you. Declaration of interest. Kimberley, any declaration of interest declared from members received?
None received prior to the meeting, Chair.
Chairman, could I, more a matter of precaution, I will simply say on matter A1, I have known the applicant on and off as a member of the Haslemere community for over 30 years, but I don't, so I would declare a non-pecuniary interest. I don't think it will affect my judgment in any way at all.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Mulliner.
None received, Chairman.
Right. A question from a member. Yes, Kimberley?
Yes, Chairman. We have a question from Councillor Hyman.
Councillor Hyman, would you like to read your question, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my question is, will the Chairman and Vice Chairman of this committee now admit that when making decisions in respect of housing development within the visitor catchment areas of the Thames Basin and Weldon Heath Spas, members must refuse consent unless a complete appropriate assessment has been conducted and consulted upon, including a detailed assessment of the extent to which the necessary mitigation measures are effective in accordance with the Planning Practice Guidance on Appropriate Assessment, reference 65006, which explains how the law must be interpreted. And thank you. I've read your answer, which is 3 pages of saying we don't accept the law because the ECJ.
Well, I would like the opportunity to actually read my answer before you proceed.
I have read the answer, and I mean, the question is straightforward enough. It simply states what is there in law and what is in the guidance, and the response says no, we don't accept.
On a point
that.
of order, Mr. Chairman, I think the appropriate procedure is for the questioner to ask his question, and then for the chairman or whoever else to respond. And no further comment is appropriate at this stage. Thank you.
That is correct, and I would like to read my answer if people don't mind. The answer that I've written, and I wrote it actually rather than, but it has been shown to members of officers, is, and I'd like to read as follows. Both myself as chair and Councillor John Rubini as the vice chair of the Western Area Planning Committee would like to thank Councillor Joey Hyman, member for Farnham Fairgrove Ward, for this question, since it provides us with the opportunity to answer the very valid question he poses as to whether or not Waverley Borough Council has been and continues to act legally when making its planning decisions against the background of Habitats directives. Waverley Borough Council has gone to extreme lengths, and I might add considerable costs, which have had to be borne by council taxpayers, including obtaining legal opinions to provide all members with an assurance that Waverley Borough Council isn't acting legally. Yet Councillor Hyman continues to persist in his personal view that Waverley Borough Council is acting illegally, denying the interpretation of learned legal counsel and statutory organisations such as Natural England. I'd like to remind Councillor Hyman that Natural England is a central government advisor and has a statutory responsibility for safeguarding the environment. Both myself and the Vice Chair actually have considerable sympathy with the views and opinions of Councillor Hyman. Indeed, we only wish that he was right, since there have been occasions when permission has had to be reluctantly granted to planning applications, which by the views and opinions of Councillor Hyman should have been refused. As in most cases, the law is, however, open to interpretation. And on this matter, there is no right or wrong. The law is not black and white, but there are many shades of grey. Neither myself nor the Vice Chair are legally trained, and neither with respect is Councillor Hyman. At a recent planning training session for all members organised by the Local Government Association's Planning Advisory Service, which I am aware Councillor Hyman attended, members were advised that the views and opinions of professionally trained planning staff had to be respected, unless it could be demonstrated by actual facts to be proved otherwise. Waverley's professional trained planning staff generally seek and take the views of Natural England, which is already stated as a statutory duty to safeguard the environment. Well, myself and Vice Chair, as well as all members of the Western and Eastern Area Planning Committees, have to recognise and accept the advice that is being given. If the views and opinions of Councillor Hyman were to be accepted as being correct, without question, then this would no doubt result in a significant number of planning applications being refused. This would almost certainly result in a number of these applications being subject to and being allowed on appeal, since planning inspectors are more likely to accept the word of professionally trained planning staff in Natural England rather than the word of a single legally untrained member. Such actions would place Waverley Borough Council in high risk of being placed in special measures and losing all its responsibility for determining any planning decisions at all. This is not a situation I would hope that Councillor Hyman would wish to see. I doubt that this answer will satisfy Councillor Hyman, but to continually persist in the interpretation of the law is neither helpful nor useful and wastes valuable time when discussing and determining planning applications. Both myself, the Vice Chair, and all members of the Western and Eastern Area Planning Committees have responsibilities to all residents of Waverley to determine all planning applications legally in accordance with the facts, with applicants whose applications are refused having the right to appeal to the Independent Planning Inspectorate. Councillor Hyman needs to accept his responsibilities as an elected member and recognise it is up to Councillor Hyman to actually prove that he is right, and everybody else, including legal counsel, professionally trained planning staff, and Natural England are wrong, rather than continue to persist in making statements that Waverley Borough Council is acting illegally. That is my answer, and there's no further debate on that matter. Thank you very much.
May I make a point of personal explanation?
No.
In accordance with the Constitution, Chair?
There's no, I'll give you the answer, gentlemen, and that is the final comment I'm prepared to say. Can we move on? Right, any relevant updates to government guidance? Chris?
Thank you, Chair. There's no updates.
Right. We move on then to the main items tonight. Subject to both of which are subject to public speaking. The first is WA 2022-00307, the land at Timberham's Farm, Old Fasten Lane, Hazelmere, GU27 2EX. Change of use of an agricultural field and buildings to mixed agricultural and outdoor recreation use for residential camping, educational day camps, and rural activities, as amended by plans received on 21st of March and 31st of March 2022. And the offer to present is Philippa. Philippa, away.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen, which might need Kimberly's input, but hopefully not. It does. Okay, good evening, members. The application proposes the change of use of an agricultural field and buildings to a mixed agricultural and outdoor recreation use for residential camping, educational day camps and rural activities. As a verbal update, since the publication of the committee agenda, there have been 3 further letters of representation, 2 of support and 1 of objection. They have not introduced any new matters reported in the committee report, and thus the officer recommendation remains for approval. Turning to the location plan, the application site is located to the northeast of Holdfast Lane, accessed via a private tarmac track, which serves a number of residential properties, as well as the application site, Imams Farm. The track is a public right-of-way. The site comprises an agricultural field, existing agricultural buildings, and areas of existing hard standing. The surrounding area is rural and agricultural, with a small number of residential properties scattered nearby. Turning to the aerial photograph, you can see, well, you have to trust me that this bit is the track leading up to Imams Farm. To the west of the site is Holdfast Lane, where there's a linear form of residential development, and to the east is an area of ancient woodland. Turning to the proposed site plan, this slide shows the indicative uses of the mixed-use buildings. Such uses are flexible use of toilets and showers and wastewater storage, 12 parking spaces here, 4 here, and staff parking here, all on existing hard standing. There's a minibus parking space here and here. There's an existing storage container here, which would be used for storing equipment. There would be a temporary shower and sink here. This building would be used as a classroom and shelter. This building here is already in use as a kitchen, so it could be used for the application site, and waste storage would be here. So turning to the photographs, photograph A is taken from the west, showing part of the existing tarmac access track and the farm. I think there's a bit of a delay. I will bear that in mind. So going back to this one, taken from the west, showing part of the existing tarmac access track and the farm here. Photograph B is taken from the northwest, showing the existing barns and one of the proposed parking areas. Here you can see that cars could be safely sited away from the right-of-way. Photograph C is taken from the northeast, showing the existing storage container that would be used to store equipment. Photograph D is taken from the east, showing existing hard standing and buildings. Photograph E is taken from the east, showing again existing hard standing and buildings. Photograph F taken from the south, showing the existing pond and the building which would be used as a classroom and shelter. Photograph G is taken from the south, so showing the existing access track in the distance and hard standing in buildings. Photograph H is taken from the northeast, facing the existing fields and the edge of the hard standing. Photograph I is taken from the northwest, facing the field which is subject to the application, as is photograph J taken from the west. The members will have noted in the agenda report that this application is located 800 metres to the south of a site known as Muddy Lane, which is accessed from Prestwick Lane in Grayswood. In 2020, a similar application was considered at this committee. That application was for the change of use of land from agriculture to provide a base for outdoor recreation, together with the erection of 4 buildings and 5 movable structures, associated parking and ancillary works. This application was refused by the committee and was dismissed at appeal. The appeal inspector dismissed the appeal on one ground, that the proposal would fail to preserve the openness of the greenbelt. Whilst this application that we're discussing today must be considered on its own individual merits, the previous decision raises some relevant points. The key differences with this application, there are a number of key differences with this application that should be noted and considered in the context of the previous appeal decision. This application seeks a mixed use of agriculture and outdoor education and recreation. It would utilise existing buildings. Temporary bell tents would be used for accommodation. Parking for both visitors, staff and minibuses would be on existing hard standing. The proposal would utilise existing tarmac access drive, and it would utilise existing utilities like water and electricity. So no development is required to introduce all of those things. A number of conditions are recommended to be attached to control the proposed use. One would require the submission and agreement of a landscape and ecological management plan. One condition prohibits amplified sound that's audible beyond the application site. Another strictly controls the camping so that it's for outdoor education and recreational activities. No more than 60 visitors should be permitted on the site at any one time. The siting of the tents is only permitted between May and September and must be removed outside of these times. And there should be no more than 15 bell tents erected at any one time. So turning to the matters for consideration, with regard to the impact on the greenbelt, paragraph 150 of the MPPF states that certain forms of development are not inappropriate in the greenbelt, provided they preserve its openness and do not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. One of these exemptions is material changes in the use of the land, such as changes for outdoor sport and recreation. As noted, the application at Muddy Lane was dismissed at appeal on the basis that it introduced built form and structures that were considered to fail to preserve openness. This application does not rely on the introduction of buildings or structures. Rather, it utilises existing buildings and hard standing. Officers consider that this is materially different to the similar proposal considered previously. The proposed change of use would preserve the openness and would not conflict with the purposes of including land within the greenbelt. The use of the land would be seasonal and would return to active agricultural use when the outdoor recreation activities ceased. As noted earlier, a number of conditions are proposed to control the proposed use. With regard to the impact on the AONB, AGLV design and impact on visual amenity, no new buildings or structures are proposed, nor any new areas of hard standing. The Surrey Hills AONB advisor is supportive of the proposal on the basis that the Surrey Hills AONB management plan gives greater emphasis to fostering the public's recreation, health and wellbeing benefits of getting out into the AONB. Officers are satisfied that the proposal would respect the landscape character of the AONB and AGLV in accordance with policy RE3. With regard to access, parking and rights of way, the application site would be accessed via the existing tarmac access track. This access track is owned by the site owner with the exception of the first 170 metres from Holdfast Lane. The owner has the right of way over this part of the access track. It is a material consideration that the track could be used for an unlimited number of agricultural vehicles at any time without seeking further permission. The County Highway Authority have been consulted on the proposal and have raised no concerns. The junction where the farm access road meets Holdfast Lane is considered capable of accommodating the associated vehicle movements. Sufficient parking would be provided on existing hard standing on site, and the application proposes the use of minibuses. The County Rights of Way officer has raised no concerns, subject to the right of way not being obstructed at any time this would apply to the existing agricultural use. With regard to the impact on residential amenity, the application site is well separated from residential properties, therefore no concern is raised regarding overbearance, loss of light, outlook, privacy or overlooking. And with regard to noise and disturbance, the application site is well separated from neighbouring properties. A condition is recommended prohibiting amplified sound that could be heard outside of the application site. With regard to traffic, given the current lawful use as an agricultural farm and that this seeks a mixed agricultural use, it is a material consideration that the existing lawful agricultural traffic could use this access at any time, and this could be intensified without further permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Philippa. Right, we have 3 speakers on this item. The first one, I hope I get his surname correct, Mr. Cortez, who wishes to object against the application, and Mr. I hope I got your name right, Mr. Cortez. I did. Pat on the head. Lucky. Yes, Mr. Cortez, you have 4 minutes to present from when you start speaking, please.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, it's a bit slow. That's okay.
Is it possible to have the speaker on the screen as well while he's speaking for the benefit of people at home?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, your 4 minutes, Mr. Cortez.
Right, thank you, Chairman, and to the Council for affording me the opportunity to speak tonight. I've been asked to speak not only on behalf of my family, but also by the owners of the White House, Woodacre, and Wisteria Cottage. We are the houses nearest the proposed development and will be the most significantly affected by it. I should start by saying I'm not opposed to the principle of development, but I am concerned that the proper procedures have not been followed here. But I'm asking the committee to reject the application, or at the very least defer its decision until a proper independent analysis of the effects of this development is commissioned. The fundamental problem with the report is that it focuses on what is actually going to happen up at the farm itself, and not on the real impact of the development, which will be felt by the houses on Holdfast Lane where it meets the track up to the farm. That is who I speak on behalf of. Before going through the objections, it's important to put this application into context. We live on Holdfast Lane. It's a quiet, narrow lane, and the only passing places are actually people's driveways. The track up to the farm is even narrower. Ms. Smith said yourself, you'd have to take her word for it to even see it on Google Earth. It's a single track road with no passing places to speak of. And what these objections are about is about traffic, greenbelt policy, and access. Increased traffic. Firstly, the application says that the approval would result in less than 5 additional vehicle journeys each day of the year. That's because the application takes the number of journeys and divides it by 365, not by the actual number of days it's proposed that the camp operates. So this artificially lowers the figure. And in fact, the real figure is over 11 additional journeys a day. The report doesn't address this. And we're not just talking about parents dropping off their children in private vehicles. We're talking about minibuses and coaches, towing trailers, turning on and off the track on a daily basis all summer long. Now, the report says that the applicant could increase agricultural operations at the site without planning permission. Of course, Margaret could do that if she wanted to, but this misses the point again. We all chose to live next to a farm. We did not choose to live next to an educational center with associated vehicle noise and traffic. And this comes on to the appropriateness of this development in a greenbelt. As Ms. Smith said, the committee previously rejected a remarkably similar application on another part of the farm. Every application must be assessed on its own merits. I get that. That's why we're here. But how is this application any different, particularly when the vehicle numbers are so understated in the application itself and the access problems are even worse? Moving from the greenbelt to other concerns inherent to villages' life, the report says the application site is well separated from any listed buildings. Again, this isn't the point. The junction between Holdfast Lane and the narrow track is meters away from a grade 2 listed building, my house. Coaches, minibuses, and cars are going to have to use the tarmac space directly in front of the house to make this tight turn. That's where my wife and I and our predecessors before us for decades park our cars. No evidence of a swept path analysis anywhere in the application. And if we're left with no choice but to put up bollards to protect our cars and house, I do not see how large vehicles of the type envisaged by this application are going to make that turn. How do I know this? I'm not a planning officer, you are, but I am a dad. And 2 months ago, I had the joy of hiring a minibus for my son's 8th birthday. And the only thing worse than listening to 15 8-year-olds in the back of a minibus was trying to drive it down Holdfast Lane and try to navigate the junction with the track in order to park. Coaches and minibuses are simply completely out of character with this country lane. Those are the objections. There were statements in support. I'd point out that those statements were universally submitted by people who either do not live nearby or in fact live on properties on the farm that are owned by the applicant. They're not independent. They should carry no weight. In sum, the application severely underestimates the true impact of the development on traffic. The report in turn does not adequately address the very real concerns of those who will actually be affected by development, which is those of us on Holdfast Lane itself, which is actually off the picture there to the bottom left, not at the farm. As a result, the conditions, while helpful, do not adequately address the concerns about access and traffic. So I ask you to reject the application or defer your decision.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Right. Okay, the next public speaker is a Ben Webb, who is speaking in support of the application. He's on Zoom. Yes, Ben, you have 4 minutes.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Webb, and I've been asked to present this submission written by the owner of the land and applicant, Mrs. Margaret Barlow, who's insufficiently well. Since the early 80s, in my profession as a teacher working in local schools and now farming in hand, since taking over my late husband's estate, I have engaged children in learning about the countryside and where their food comes from. I've worked both locally in schools and at farming food events across the UK. Many of the activities run on the farm were supported by Surrey Wildlife Trust, Surrey Agricultural Society, the RSPB, Hazelmere Museum and Hazelmere Natural History Society. Imburn's Farm Granary, set up in 2006 as a farm diversification, has developed key practical workshops for the children to learn where their cereal-based food comes from. Now, with the support of a business partner, Surrey Hills and Rivers, we are able to develop these activities further. I draw your particular attention to Mrs. Taylor Gooby's letter of support for this application, which has taken into account the estate's historical achievements and how we aspire to achieve even more through this application. Mrs. Taylor Gooby is a former headmistress of the Royal School with children in all ages from nursery to sixth form. With our business partners, we have also now recorded universally positive feedback from last summer's trial residential camps and this Easter's day activities on the site that is subject to this application. At Easter, our day camps provided for a total of 60 places that spread over 2 weeks, in respect of whom 90% of the children were eligible for free school meals. These places were funded by Surrey County Council under the Holiday Activities and Food Scheme. We brought 80% of the visitors to the site by our own minibus, and even the few, including staff, that came by car, virtually all shared lifts. Most of us at this meeting will recall days of setting off in the morning into the countryside with siblings or friends and committing only that we'll be back for tea. Those days are gone. Without intervention, children are more likely to sit indoors for most of the day with a television, a games console, an iPad or a phone, or in many cases, all of those things. Beleaguered parents struggle, and it makes for a daily conflict and a dawn till dusk battle to occupy the children with other things. It's also a battle that working parents can only fight part-time. It simply isn't one that parents can win on their own. Schools already recognise the value of forest school outdoor activities, and this project is about immersing children in the countryside for repeat or extended periods, providing something of the very highest quality here just outside Hazelmere. The children have the freedom of the days out in the countryside that we so fondly remember, yet with all the supervision and facilitation of personal development that you'd expect from qualified, experienced staff, many of whom are leaders, teachers, or retired teachers like myself. With this planning application, we can offer overnight camping for visitors too. This is immersion in the countryside in the most special of ways, and combined with the day visit formats, it also makes for a sound business model. The day and residential formats together provide a way for children of any type of background to develop a love, understanding and knowledge of the countryside and be healthier in mind and body, because they can constructively spend a meaningful amount of time in the countryside and they can keep coming back. Our supporters already include the Surrey Hills AONB board and enterprises, Surrey County Council's holiday activities and food scheme, as already mentioned, DEFRA's farming in protected landscape scheme, a growing list of local schools and a growing list of local nature focus groups, such as the RSPB, the NFU and farming and countryside education. We ask that this committee also supports us by allowing this application, unfettered by any conditions beyond those already duly considered and reasonably proposed by the planning officers. This application is a project not only full of the best intentions, but is demonstrably delivering on it already. We wish we could have had another 4 minutes to simply quote the children and parents' excitement and feedback for every day they've spent with us so far. We ask this committee to please understand our visions and intentions, to deliver special outdoor creative learning experiences, and to look favourably on this application for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. Right, the third speaker is the ward councillor, Councillor Knowles. Councillor Knowles, you have 4 minutes now, and of course you have the right to another 4 minutes at the end of the debate. Councillor Knowles.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening. I've heard what has been said by the objector and the applicant, and both have made good points, and I'm sympathetic with. My concern is that this application will completely change the use in a very rural area. Holdfast Lane is an unclassified narrow road, and there can be no doubt, despite any spin that's put on it, that this application will see a vast increase in traffic. For those attending the functions on the site, this is not in walking distance of anywhere, except for a few houses close by. There is no doubt visitors will be by motor vehicle, and this will completely change the characteristics of the area, and in my opinion will result in loss of amenity for the residents close by. We've heard 60 visitors at a time. This isn't going to be 1 or 2 vehicles bringing them, and the noise from the site. And I note the condition, but having been on this council for 15 years, I know, as I'm sure members do, conditions aren't worth the paper they're written on because they're not enforceable. And there's always an excuse for not enforcing. So on balance, I fear that this completely changed the character of the area, and there'll be a serious loss of amenity for residents close by. Therefore, I ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Knowles. Of course, you have 4 minutes at the end too, if you so wish. Right, councillors, anybody wish to start with the Molyneux and then Councillor Molyneux.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the first thing to tackle is the comparison between this application and the one at Muddy Lane. And it seems to me that the absence of any additional fixed buildings is a crucial difference. And having refreshed my memory of the Muddy Lane decision and the inspector's comments when he refused it on appeal, I'm of the opinion that we have no reason to refuse this application on those grounds. The only changes will be temporary, in the sense the bell tents will be there from May to September and not there for the remaining 7 months of the year. So I think it would be unreasonable to try and refuse this application on either Greenbelt or AONB grounds. Indeed, I note with a certain amusement that the AONB officer was, I think, slightly miffed that his support for the Muddy Lane application did not get more attention from the inspector. But I think we can understand that the erection of 4 permanent structures was enough of an insult to the openness of that site, which was a very open site, to make the decision perfectly understandable. When we move on to the increase in the amount of traffic and the impact on residents' amenity, it gets more difficult. But I think the officers have rightly drawn attention to the fact that some things which might be thought to be material considerations actually are not. And certainly I don't think there's any impact on the listing building from the fact that traffic past it is more frequent. I fully agree with the objector who pointed out that providing a daily traffic increase figure based on 365 days when you only intend to use it for something about 150 days is not really cricket. However, having said that, the number that you come up with, 11 a day, I'm not sure it really will be every day. I think we're focused at the weekends. That is the one which one has to think about. I have used Holdfast Lane for the last 30 odd years that I've lived in Hazelmere. It's not, in my experience, that quiet a road. And it is surprising how many vehicles can use a road in an hour without actually being noticed all that much. So while I don't find this an easy one, I think the benefits which arise from providing this facility do, in my opinion, outweigh the harms that Councillor Knowles and the objector have drawn attention to. And I think, while I listen very carefully to what others have to say, I am minded to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, there are good points in this application. There we have farming and conservation education and hiking, which is, these are all very good things. And people are staying in bell tent accommodations. There's no permanent features. However, the devil is in the detail. And the details are you could have 60 people attending over 5 months. There's no indication how often this will be used over the summer period. There's a lot of activity. And then there's mountain biking. I don't understand why mountain biking is added to this. This area in the Chiddingfold, Grayswood area, they're quite fragile footpaths, clay surfaces. There could be quite a bit of damage to the footpaths, and a lot of people could be rather annoyed about that. Taking application as it stands, I think as it's written, it's too loose. There's good things in it, but I think as it stands, I cannot support it.
Councillor Rubini, then Councillor Edmonds. Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we looked at the last application and turned it down, and we must look at this one as a standalone. And as been mentioned, and of course what we've seen, is that basically the last one, and I opposed it because it had buildings and structures added to the greenbelt area. This one has no such structures added. It's all on tarmac. Parking is on tarmac. The structures are being used that are not being used at the moment. The only thing we will see are temporary bell tents, which will be removed for the field to recover, and presumably wildlife and lambs, whatever it was that was using it, to be placed back on it. Now, in a rural area, it is always difficult over the summer period for young people to find any sort of things to do, particularly in sort of rural education and other things that relate to our area. So personally, I am very much in favour of supporting young people in trying to find venues that are suitable for what they're doing. I think this is a first-class example of showing young people what they can achieve, to teach them about the rural areas. And I'm sure that, as the supporter said just now, that he has experience in actually giving over those lessons to young people. So I think the education part and the fact that we have no extra structures or parking on any of the land apart from that already in use, I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chairman. When preparing for planning meetings, I take great care to prepare notes, which is why I refer to notes. I've looked at what's been said tonight and compared them with the notes that I've made. So my notes remain valid. The first point I'd like to make is that the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 requires that sustainable development have regard for the desirability of achieving good design. I take good design holistically, the whole project. The second concern I had was that the development is incompatible with the local plan 2002 policy D1 environmental implications of development, and policy D4, design and layout. The conditions are unenforceable when we consider that the resources that are available. In order to be compatible with the development plan, conditions have to be enforceable. The planning conditions should be kept to a minimum, which they have been. However, they are not enforceable. For me, this is inappropriate greenbelt development. I saw a country file program on BBC where a farmer was convinced that even his light pollution was causing harm to the environment. We have now a significant increase in noise and light pollution. Light pollution has a damning effect on biodiversity. Once the green belts have been defined, we should protect them. We are no longer protecting them. The green belt deserves protection, especially when we have declared a climate emergency. The other point I have is looking at the single track. We have access for emergency and utility vehicles. Emergency vehicles could be impeded when we've got 60 people on site. The ambulances could have problems getting through to rescue and provide first aid. The final point is there was a mention that the farm needs this to become a global, growing concern. We have global farming concerns for 2023. Farming should be sustainable. And on these facts, I can no longer support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coburn and Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I vehemently oppose the previous application. In fact, I don't even think they're particularly similar. I mean, I know they're close by, but to me, it was completely wrong. The amount of building and the other structures that were put on the site, I couldn't even begin to support what that site was trying to achieve. And although I've been a stalwart defender of the Green Belt and remain so, we are in a very difficult situation here, a very different situation. You know, we're not actually, or this application is not on the field itself, is not actually making any difference to the openness of the Green Belt, apart from with temporary structures, which we know are that they're tents, so they're not going to stay, you know, all the time. Again, conditions are all important because most of us have been around long enough to be disappointed with things that we thought were true, and then, you know, further down the line, conditions slightly change. So as long as we're protecting the openness of the land for the future, and this is very much a temporary, seasonal change, then I think I can accept it. I do take the point about minibuses and access, but as anyone who's been to any of the scout and guide areas just around the area, I mean, getting up those in anything is a nightmare, and they manage to rattle the buses up and back. So, you know, I agree that there will be an impact on the nearby residents, but I can't see that we actually have any planning grounds to turn this one down. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not familiar with the area. It's a long way from where I live. But I'm looking at the map and I see that Holdfast Lane is quite a long road when it extends into other roads. So it clearly must carry quite a lot of traffic. There's quite a lot of houses along the road. So there must be a fair amount of traffic already on that road, as has been pointed out previously here. So I'm thinking about the overall impact of extra vehicle movements for this facility. And I think realistically, in my mind, it is unlikely to have a significant impact in terms of the extra movements. Generally, those movements are related to bringing the people to the site, and then they spend most of their time on the site. Is normally the way, at least. How much they move around on mountain bikes or walks, I'm not quite sure. So I'm mainly concerned about the impact on the neighbours. I'm minded to think, I'm afraid, that I don't think it is all that high. And I don't think the vehicle movements extra are all that high either. So then I also think about the benefits of the proposed amenity for the young people that are going to be involved there. And I think that is a significant benefit to the overall community, even if some of them have come quite a long way to get there. And I think we must be mindful of all the things that are needed to support physical activity and youth education, etc. So overall, I'm in support of the application and would support the recommendation of the officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hyman and Councillor Martin. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on page 9 of the officer report, I see that the County Highway Authority has no objections, and listening to Mr. Cutter's issues regarding the access by his property. Surrey Highway say they have no objections or requirements, but there's a note the need to consult Surrey County Council's countryside access team. I notice there's a lot of other people been consulted, and I take particular note of Open Spaces Society's objection here. But otherwise, I'm having trouble in finding cogent planning reasons for refusal, because it is very different to, I think, to the Muddy Lane. Can you tell me, was Surrey County Council's countryside access team consulted? And if so, what did they say?
I think Philippa was about to give you the answer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Hyman. I'll read it out to you. Dear Philippa, further to our conversation just now, based on the information you gave me regarding the application, I don't believe it will have a negative impact on the public footpath Hazelmere FP 38. However, please advise the applicant that there must be no obstruction of the public footpath at any time. This includes the storing of equipment. No activity should be undertaken on the path where they might prevent walkers easily passing along it, and then direct the applicant to a particular contact should they have any queries about it.
And there wouldn't be any mountain biking on these rights of way. That would be all off of these, or not.
Well, the applicant has suggested that mountain biking is one of the activities that might take place from the site, but you could cycle on. It's a right of way at the moment, so people could use it as a right of way currently.
Okay. Councillor Martin.
I've always regarded farmers as custodians of the countryside. Actually, we wouldn't have the countryside we have if we weren't for farmers. When I look at this ANOB, and as he said, farmland makes a valuable contribution to the character of the Surrey Hills ANOB, but is gradually diminishing. Therefore, appropriate farm diversification projects are welcome in this AONB. If we want to keep farms and our countryside as it is, we've got to support farmers in these applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak? Right. Oh.
Could I come back very briefly? It's just to make a point which I perhaps omitted or didn't make sufficiently clear, because I listened very carefully to what Councillor Edmonds had to say, because he always goes into great detail in these matters. And I think we need to take account of the fact on page 13, where the officers discuss the Muddy Lane decision and appeal. And to me, key words are the line just above the end of paragraph 10. The inspector found no other concerns with proposed development. And I think Councillor Hyman put it quite well. It's difficult to find proper planning reasons to object to this unless you were going to go down the Greenbelt and AONB route. And I think that's difficult given the significant difference. So if you read what the inspector actually said, he was focusing solely on that. And there was no doubt the presence of fixed buildings, new fixed buildings, in otherwise completely open site was what turned his decision against it. Whereas here we've got existing buildings which have been there for some time, which are going to be used for support purposes. So I think it's important to remember that I think this would be a very difficult one to win on appeal if we were to refuse it. Thank you, Chairman, for letting me come back.
Thank you very much. Right. You want to? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just one very brief comment. There's been a couple of mentions of conditions and the fact that that they yeah, that they don't serve a useful function, and officers consider they are a really important tool in terms of how we would consider a development and what conditions are appropriate. So we've given quite a bit of thought to the wording of those conditions and the 6 tests in terms of planning conditions. So yeah, those have been given due consideration by officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, Councillor Knowles, you have another 4 minutes if you so wish, Councillor.
Thank you very much. No, I don't think there's any point in repeating myself. I'll just stand by the remarks I made earlier. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, shall we move to the recommendation? The recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 8 and information 1 to 4, permission be granted. Could those in favour please raise their hand? Those against? What's the result?
Thank you, Chairman. That's 8 in favour, 2 against and no abstentions.
Then the application is granted. Thank you very much for that one. Can we move on to the final application of the night, which is WA 2022-00019, the land at 11 Fernsmead, Farnham. The erection of a single-storey extension based on plans received on the 8th of March. I call this in because of a lot of public objections to this, but anyway, Sam, your presentation, please.
Let's get to my slide. So the application for consideration is the erection of a single-storey extension at 11 Fernsmead. Officers do have one verbal update. The officers report paragraph 11.4 states that both neighbouring dwellings have a secondary window. To clarify, number 10 has a single set of French doors and number 12 has one window and a set of French doors. There also were some amendments received on the 8th of March. It was to move the proposal off the flank boundary. It was a minor change. So this is the location plan. So 11 Fernsmead is one of a set of 14 terrace dwellings. Parking facilities are located in the centre. It's to the south of Crosby Way, with Bell Meadow to the south, and then Headway House to the west, which is a car auction site. And the aerial view should show that a bit better. Bell Meadow there with the Riverway below. Just going back actually to the aerial view. So the applicant has obviously provided a flood risk assessment as the site is sat within flood zone 2. The assessment has a number of recommendations for flood resilience measures. Officers note that as a result of the application being considered minor development, the Environment Agency was not required to be consulted on this application.
Sorry, I can't see that clearly. Could you turn down the lights so that I can actually see what's on the screen, please? Sorry.
So yeah, that's Bell Meadow to the south. You've got Headway House, which is this larger building to the west, and then the set of houses, the 14 houses there with the sort of blue dot, if you can just about see it, that's 11 Fernsmead. So takes a little moment. The existing plans, so the dwelling is a terrace property with parking facilities to the front. Then to the rear is a garden space with a pergola, wooden pergola attached to the dwelling. There we go. So the proposed plans, it's a rear extension that extends off the rear wall by 4 meters. It's got an eaves height, if you can just about see, it's quite faded, but 2.6 meter eave height, and the roof will slope up to adjoin the house with a sort of roof height of 3.3 meters. The sort of extension from the back is in line with residential SPD guidance. The proposal would use matching materials to the existing dwelling house with brick and clay tiles. It's also orientated to the rear and away from Crosby Way, so it's not readily visible from the street scene. The proposal, as you can see here, would marginally impact the 45-degree rule of the 2 neighbours at number 10 and number 12. However, number 12 has 1 window and double doors serving a rear kitchen space, and so under residential guidance, lesser importance is attributed with a secondary window. Coupled with the modest height, existing 1.8 meter fence line and pergola, officers are satisfied there would not be a significant impact to loss of light, overbearing form, or loss of privacy. So these are some photos. Photo A shows the front of the dwelling with the parking facilities in front. The second photo is actually from the neighbour at number 12, looking towards 11 Fernsmead here. You can just about see the pergola with the existing fence line. And photo B is 11 Fernsmead. It's the hard, there we go, is the hard surfacing and where the extension will be located. So the main matters for consideration will be the design and visual amenity, neighbouring amenity, and the flood risk officer recommending approval for this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sam. Well, I have 2 public speakers on this item. The first being Fiona Brown, I presume she's online, who wishes to object to the application. Yes, please.
Sorry, it's just coming off mute there. Yes, afternoon, everybody. I am Fiona Brown. I'm the homeowner of number 12 Fernsmead, and I'm speaking today on behalf of my neighbour Benta Jordan, who lives at number 10 Fernsmead. We are objecting to the proposed extension based on 2 grounds. First is loss of light to our habitual rooms, and the second is noise disturbance as a result of the glass roof light that is proposed. On the first point, our habitable rooms are a lounge and dining area at number 10 and a kitchen and dining room within my property. Both are substantially impacted by the proposal. I note in the planning report it states that under paragraph 11, the proposal would marginally impact the 45-degree rule. Within the SPD guidance, it does state all proposals should satisfy the 45-degree and 25-degree test, which this does not, however minimal. The report also states that if the side window is a secondary window, then the loss of light will be of lesser importance. And as Sam has already stated, in the report, it does state that both properties have a secondary window, which is not the case at number 10. There is a patio window. We both strongly disagree regarding the amount of loss of light, which is not acceptable to our habitable rooms. These are spaces we share with our families and we use on a daily basis. Additionally, the height of the wall from the property is pitched at 3.3 metres. And whilst I note that the Waverley SPD regulations do state that the length of the proposed extension is acceptable at 4 metres, properties that are terraced within the permitted development regulations do say a height of 3 metres and a length of 3 metres. This is an extremely large extension when you take into account the small gardens attached to these houses. The addition of the large Roof light will also bring with it the ability to generate noise pollution, particularly if that window is opened. In summary, we strongly object to the loss of light. The 45-degree rule is there for a reason. This proposal does not comply with that. There is no secondary window at number 10. The size of the proposal is overbearing in the context of the proportion of the property. It cannot be right that some rules are applied to but others are disregarded, with the outcome being the owner of number 11, who has never lived at the property and rents it out to students. And whilst I appreciate that's not a matter for this committee, is nonetheless relevant context, is favoured over the local residents who live in the homes. I would urge you to consider all these points and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final person is a Mark Leader who is speaking in support of the application. Mark, before I hear, so you know you've got 4 minutes from when.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee. I just wanted to make comment on design, residential amenity, garden size and flood risk. In design terms, the proposal is single story, as have been granted with other extensions in the locality. Your officers refer to the largely similar extension at number 23, and there have been many single-story conservatories added to dwellings. As such, there can be no objection to the principle of this form of extension, and the applicant may reasonably expect consistency in decision-making. I note the objections of the Town Council. However, and as correctly appraised by your officers, the proposed extension is unobtrusive and only glimpses of the upper parts of the roof could be seen from the public highway, and much less so from the Bishop's Meadow. Turning to residential amenity, in respect of daylight and the effect of the proposal on amenity, regard must properly be given to the orientation and sun path, as well as the position of fenestration. In this regard, the 45 and 25-degree rule are of limited value, because the gardens and rooms are predominantly south-facing. Your officer's report refers to the sources of light to the adjoining dwellings in the form of windows and patio doors. The proposal would not have a harmful effect, which would justify the withholding of planning permission. In particular, number 10 will benefit from east and south-facing sunlight into the garden and lounge. In respect of the effect on number 12, the 3-story townhouses were designed with the kitchen dining room at the rear and the lounge on the first floor. It follows that the principal living room is wholly unaffected by the proposed extension. The scale of the proposed building, when seen above the 2-meter high boundary fences, would not be unacceptable and does not materially enclose the gardens or enjoyment of this space. On the matter of garden size, the application property has a modest garden, as is typical of a townhouse. There is a garden shed at number 11, the application property, which if considered necessary could be removed by way of a planning condition. A small bike store would suffice in its place. On the matter of flood risk, the application is accompanied by an assessment which establishes there would be no risk of flooding or exacerbation of risk elsewhere. Neither the lead local flood authority nor the Environment Agency raises any technical objections to the proposal. On the basis of the foregoing, the development proposal is acceptable on its merits and complies with your policies. Planning permission should be granted as per your officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right. Councillors, is open to debate. Councillor Edmonds and then Councillor James. Councillor Edmonds.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I've got 2 questions. The first is, what do you mean by marginal in terms of the 45-degree angle?
I'm
I
sure
mean, marginal is anything. We really need facts.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to put the slide up again that shows the shows the infringement. It is a rule of thumb rather than within guidance rather than setting policy. So we have to give consideration to.
So okay, I need to come. That drawing is not clear to me. You need to have a look.
5-degree or so difference. From there is a 5-degree or so difference between the edge of the corner of the proposed extension.
5 degrees. Why do you say that's not significant?
Thank you, Chair. So it's a matter of judgment in terms of the height of the extension and the depth and the single-story nature of it. So it's for those reasons, and that's what we've set out in the report as well.
I mean, the reason I make the point is we've developed an SPD for reasons. Unless you follow the SPD, then we're wasting time. The second question, which is far more important, is the fact that the LPA seems to be reluctant to put a restriction on construction noise. Now, I can recall one distressed resident being concerned about uncontrolled construction noise and the harm it was doing to her family. I'm not sure why the LPA do not require a control. It affects mental health, and for a semi-detached, it's almost untenable. Essentially, we put an unnecessary harm on the resident. So please, can you advise why the limit on construction hours was not placed?
Chris.
And thank you, Chair. We have to look at whether it's proportionate to put a condition on, and for a large-scale residential development for many houses, then yes, it would be appropriate. And for a small single-story rear extension, it's not proportionate to put that on in officers' opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I cannot accept that it's proportionate to harm an individual. So on that basis, I will vote against this application. Thank you.
James.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be supporting the application. On the plan, it's very interesting that number 13 is set back probably equal distance from the extension of number 11. And I imagine that that's a 3-story building. So the difference, this is only going to be a single story. So if I was number 13, I'd have been objecting to number 12 being built, as it's a 3, mind you, they were all built at the same time. And everybody's got single story extension. It's the way we're moving forward. My next door neighbours are building one right up to my fence, and I've got a 16th century listed building, but I've got no problem because they're making it a family house. It was built with a 2 up, 2 down, and now it's got a family. I'm afraid we move on. And for the previous application, whilst I understand everybody buys something because of where it is, but you can't stop things being built. We've got policies. If they're adhered to properly, sometimes we refuse them, sometimes we don't. But I'm afraid this one, if they want a single story extension, at least they're applying for permission and they aren't putting it up without, and then we're having to dive in. So I will be supporting the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak?
Well, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was just in consideration of loss of amenity. I mean, it's number 11. This would take a big chunk out of the garden, not half of it, but quite a large chunk, and it would leave very little. As Mr. Leedale said, there's a shed there that could be removed, and we could condition that if we wanted to, whatever, if we were minded to grant. And he referred to number 23. I wondered which had a similar size. He says the number 23 has a similar size extension on it. Is that directly comparable, if the officers can help on that? Is that directly comparable in terms of the loss of amenity space? I mean, obviously, if 23's got a much larger garden, as some of these homes have, a much longer garden, then it's it's not going to have the same impact in that respect. I am worried about the 45-degree rule as well, but I agree to some extent with what Councillor James has just said. So if you could help me out with the loss of amenity at number 11 and 23.
Do you want to answer that, Chris or Tom?
Thank you, Chair. We don't have the plans for number 23 available at the moment. So what I would suggest is you assess it on its merits, and yeah, that's all we can say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, before could I just refer to condition 1, Chairman, as if members are minded to grant, they're not on page 29. Condition 1 has got open square parentheses, upside down question mark, full stop, close square parentheses, full stop, and it's an oops sign. I think I just wondered if we could correct that.
Yes, that was my fault. I'll add the plan numbers to that. Yeah, don't worry about that.
Right. Anybody? Yes. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the case officer just to repeat what he said by way of verbal update? I'm beginning to get a bit of a tick about verbal updates, and that was the classic example where I didn't actually understand what you said. So could you now go through it slowly, and could you also say when this information came to you and why we couldn't have had it in writing? So first of all, what did you say, Sam?
Yeah, tickets for Sam.
So the verbal update was the officer's report. It was paragraph 11.4, which was in the residential amenity section. It was that both neighbouring dwellings, I'd stated in the report that both neighbouring dwellings have a secondary window. It was to clarify that number 10 only has a single set of French doors. Number 12, which is the property to the north, has one window and a set of French doors. So the comment about the secondary window does apply to number 12, but it does not apply to number 10.
Which could be quite a material point. So when did you find this out? That the report, it's not point 4, it's actually bullet point 4. And I must admit, if you cared to use decimal points, I for one would find it easier. So when did this become apparent?
Thank you, Chair. If we could have updated sooner, we would have done. Apologies that it is at this point, but it really does. Yeah, we did want to clarify, and also it was something that was mentioned in one of the speakers' comments as well. So we did want to make sure we clarified it. Apologies, it couldn't be sooner.
Making a bit of a thing about it because I had a conversation with the head of planning on exactly this point, and he promised that something would be done about it. Can I just repeat that verbal updates are to be avoided if at all possible, and even if you get the information on the same day, it'd be far more easier for us as committee members if we had it in writing so we could absorb it and understand it. I mean, I'm not convinced from what I've seen that it is actually that immaterial. I mean, if we look at the block plan, could we go back to the location plan and the block plan? I think you want to go one back before that. What I'm just keen to check, you've got it's plans annex for this thing. It's got location plan and block plan. It's that one. No, that's not the one that I'm after. It's our page 30. I think you showed us one screen which represented page 30. What I want to go back to if that's all that we've got. If we go right now, can I just check the location plan on page 30? Is that the traditional one where north is pointing upwards? There's no compass rose given, but can I assume that that's what it means?
Yes, number 12 is to the north, number 10 is to the south.
Right. So this is the reference made to the light that number 10 would get, the one with the non-secondary window, which would be more affected by the 45 degree rule. All right, they wouldn't get the benefit of the "it doesn't matter" exemption. That has got largely south-facing light with a bit of east. Okay, I see that. So the main impact on it would actually be, if you like, westerly light, which is obviously the back end of the day. So is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Right. Thank you, Chairman.
Any others can wish to speak, or shall I move to the recommendation? Okay, we'll move. And abstain?
Thank you, Chairman. That's 6 in favour, 1 against and 3 abstentions, so that's carried.
Thank you very much. That application is granted. Well, that's all for tonight, for our colleagues. And in fact, there's nothing in the exempt item, as usual. Therefore, the meeting is now closed. Thank you. Good night and have a safe journey.